Throughout history, altered states of consciousness, whether induced by meditation, psychedelics, near-death experiences, or spontaneous mystical insight, have been described in religious and spiritual terms. Tibetan Buddhism, particularly its teachings on the Bardos, provides one of the most structured maps of these states, detailing the shifting landscapes of perception, time, selfhood, and reality that unfold during profound transitions. However, many modern thinkers, especially those grounded in science and rational inquiry, struggle with interpretations rooted in religious cosmology. Today, I offer an alternative approach, a quantum psychological reinterpretation of the Bardos, framing these experiences not as supernatural events, but as natural, lawful expressions of consciousness within an observer-dependent reality. Quantum mechanics provides an extraordinary framework for understanding the nature of perception, time, identity, and meaning. It suggests that reality is not fixed or absolute, but a field of probability that is shaped by observation. Neuroscience too supports this view, showing that the brain constructs reality dynamically, filtering sensory input and organizing it into meaningful patterns. When consciousness enters altered states, these filtering mechanisms loosen, allowing for an expanded range of perception and cognition. Instead of dismissing these experiences as distortions or hallucinations, we can understand them as temporary excursions into a broader cognitive and perceptual landscape, one that reveals the flexible, participatory nature of existence itself. By applying quantum principles, such as superposition, entanglement, wave function collapse, and observer effect, to the Tibetan Bardo framework, we create a model that speaks both to the rational skeptic and to the mystic. Our model does not demand religious belief, nor does it reduce profound experiences to mere neural artifacts. Rather, it acknowledges that consciousness behaves like a quantum system, existing in multiple states until observed, fluctuating between self and non-self, time and timelessness, meaning and void. Each Bardo, then, is a phase of this unfolding quantum field of awareness. And so, I invite you to explore these states through a new lens, one that allows for deep insight without requiring dogma, and one that reveals the ever-shifting, ever-participatory nature of reality itself. The perceptual Bardo begins when familiar sensory boundaries start to blur or intensify, prompting visions of geometric patterns or radiant lights and transforming mundane sights into something luminous. One way to interpret such phenomena is as the mind's superposed state of perception, akin to quantum particles existing in multiple potentials. In this sense, it is not that the external world is definitively changing, but rather your attention is shifting, allowing latent possibilities to emerge all at once. When you experience a blending of senses, such as hearing colors or seeing sounds, it can be helpful to regard this as an entangled mode of perception rather than mere distortion. Just as quantum entanglement links particles in ways that transcend conventional distance or time, your senses here may feel interconnected and undifferentiated. Seeing sacred mandalas or mythic figures may then be understood as the collapse of this superposition into a specific vision, shaped by your cultural background, emotional state, or spiritual beliefs. Dissolution, where forms appear to melt or lose their solidity, can likewise be interpreted as the wave function of perception entering a fluid, uncollapsed phase. Instead of resisting the apparent disintegration of reality, consider the Tibetan insight that all forms are illusory and ever-changing. By acknowledging that your observation contributes to how reality presents itself, you may navigate these vivid or disorienting perceptions without becoming overwhelmed by their impermanence. The temporal Bardo manifests when your sense of time warps, revealing moments that stretch into vast expanses or shrink into fleeting blinks. From a quantum perspective, you could view this as stepping outside the classical notion of linear time and glimpsing something akin to the block universe theory, where all points in time exist simultaneously. Instead of concluding that you are losing your grip on reality, you might interpret these shifts as the mind touching a deeper temporal structure, one that ordinary perception seldom acknowledges. If you find yourself experiencing loops of déjà vu or feeling as though you have lived this moment countless times, consider the possibility of cyclical time resembling quantum time loops. The Tibetan teachings caution against resistance, since seeing these loops as prisons often amplifies dread. Alternatively, you can hold them lightly as cosmic echoes that remind you of karma, interdependence, or the non-linear nature of awareness. When these distortions ease into a sense of timeless presence, the quantum idea of now as the only truly observed moment becomes vivid. The past and future recede into probability, leaving the present as the sole reality that consciousness is actively measuring. Tibetan wisdom often counsels that the eternal now is a portal to liberation, urging us to relax into that immediacy rather than clinging to a narrative of before or after. Recognizing time as a malleable field rather than a rigid structure can gently shift fear or confusion into awe. In the ego bardo, your sense of identity may expand into cosmic grandeur or disappear altogether, only to reform later with new insights. Seen through a quantum lens, the ego behaves much like an entangled particle system. It appears localized and solid under everyday conditions, yet under altered observation, its boundaries dissolve and reveal an underlying unity with the larger field of consciousness. Experiences of ego expansion can be interpreted as the recognition that yourself is not truly separate from the environment, or others mirroring the phenomenon of entangled particles that influence each other across vast distances. Tibetan teachings often refer to this as discovering your primordial awareness or Buddha nature, an understanding that your mind is part of something vast. Here, the key is to enjoy the expansiveness without becoming attached to it, for attachment can reassert the very boundaries you momentarily transcended. When ego annihilation occurs, and the very notion of I vanishes, quantum decoherence offers a parallel, the loss of a local perspective that once defined your identity. Rather than seeing this disappearance as personal destruction, Tibetan wisdom reframes it as the path toward deeper freedom. If a new sense of self does arise, treat it as a different manifestation of the quantum wave function collapsing into form. Recognizing that this self is both real in daily life yet ultimately insubstantial in a wider sense can soften the shock and help integrate the experience. Shifts in thinking often accompany these altered states, producing insights that seem to arise fully formed, bypassing logical sequence or known cognitive pathways. Quantum cognition suggests that thoughts can exist in superposition. Contradictory ideas can coexist until your mind selects one interpretation or holds multiple interpretations without forcing a resolution. This can explain why you may feel profound clarity in the midst of apparent paradox. Paradox itself becomes a portal rather than an obstacle. The Tibetan tradition views koan-like contradictions and riddles as invitations to transcend dualistic thinking. Embracing paradox from a quantum standpoint means allowing two truths to coexist, thereby opening a space for non-dual awareness to shine. Instead of straining to reconcile opposites, you might simply notice that both perspectives can be valid at once. Such experiences sometimes culminate in gnosis, a direct form of knowing that feels beyond reasoning. Gnosis parallels the quantum leap, a sudden shift in understanding as if knowledge were there all along, waiting to be observed. Tibetan teachings caution that even such luminous insights are not the final word, they are glimpses of the mind's deeper capacity. Recognizing them as transient phenomena can help preserve humility and prevent clinging to any singular interpretation of ultimate truth. Emotions may oscillate wildly in these states, swinging between extremes of bliss and dread. From a quantum perspective, emotions can be seen as fluctuating energies that change when observed, suggesting that your stance toward them can determine whether they intensify or transform. In Tibetan thought, emotions are waves arising in the ocean of mind. They are neither permanent nor wholly yours. Ecstasy might feel like being flooded with cosmic love or joy, while terror can manifest as existential panic or dread of the unknown. Holding both experiences in the same quantum field allows you to see them as two expressions of a single energetic continuum. Rather than labeling one as good and the other as bad, the shift to a broader perspective can reveal that they are equally transient and equally capable of revealing truth. Surrender is the means by which these emotional fluctuations find resolution. Instead of trying to hold on to bliss or banish fear, you simply remain open to the changing emotional landscape, much as a quantum observer refrains from overly collapsing the wave function. This act of allowing, advocated by Tibetan practice, lets emotions rise and fall without fixating on any single state. In doing so, you create room for genuine transformation rather than reaction. Under altered or mystical conditions, reality can shift between feeling like something you are passively witnessing, something you are actively co-creating, and something that dissolves all distinctions entirely. In quantum terms, this reflects the observer effect. The universe appears differently depending on how you measure or engage with it. A detached stance may reveal the world as an unfolding tapestry, while a participatory stance can blur the lines between inner and outer realms. Moments of oneness, where observer and observed collapse into unity, resonate with the idea that at the most fundamental level, the universe is a single, interconnected field. Tibetan teachings often view this as a glimpse of the true nature of phenomena, unbound by the dualities of subject versus object. Instead of regarding such unitive states as a final goal, it can be helpful to interpret them as a reminder that we are never fully separate from the world in which we live. Each of these modes, observer, participant, or oneness, can cycle in and out throughout a single journey. Rather than seeing them as progress toward an endpoint, consider them as differing perspectives on the same reality. From a quantum stance, you switch the lens through which you measure existence, shifting from neutrality to immersion to identity with the whole. Tibetan insight suggests that freedom lies in recognizing all these modes as dynamic plays of consciousness rather than ultimate truths. Encountering union, meaning, or a gaping void often signals the climax of an altered state journey. When a sense of cosmic oneness arises, it can be interpreted as the collapse of all separate existences into a single, universal wave function, echoing Tibetan descriptions of profound unity with the Dharmakaya or the divine. Rather than clinging to this experience as the sole truth, it can be viewed as a fleeting but valuable revelation of interconnectedness that underpins reality. Moments of profound meaning may take shape as grand realizations about life's purpose, spiritual convictions, or karmic patterns. Interpreting these flashes through quantum ontology suggests they are temporary collapses of multiple possible insights into one resonant interpretation. Tibetan wisdom often cautions that such revelations, while potent, remain constructs of the mind and should be held lightly. The encounter with the abyss can be the most unsettling, the sudden recognition that there is nothing beneath all appearances. Yet, from a quantum perspective, emptiness is not nothingness, but the field of potential from which all events arise. Tibetan teachings mirror this view by describing the void as luminous and creatively fertile. Interpreting the abyss in this way can transform fear into reverence, as you realize that what appears as sheer emptiness also encompasses limitless possibility. The journey through the Bardos is not about reaching a final truth. Just as quantum physics tells us there is no single fixed reality independent of observation. Rather, it is about understanding that consciousness exists in a dynamic field of potential, shifting states in ways that can be interpreted through multiple frameworks. Tibetan mysticism offers one of the most sophisticated descriptions of this process, and quantum psychology provides a way to translate it into a language that aligns with modern science and rational inquiry. By merging these perspectives, we gain a model of consciousness that respects both empirical observation and the lived reality of profound experience. A key insight from quantum mechanics is that observation shapes reality, not just in the physical world, but in the structure of experience itself. This means that the way you engage with altered states influences what emerges from them. Fear constricts possibility, collapsing experience into rigid patterns of suffering. Openness and surrender allow reality to remain fluid, permitting insights to unfold naturally. Whether one experiences a divine vision, a timeless void, or the death and rebirth of the self, these are not absolute truths, but states within a greater field of awareness. Understanding this can help dissolve attachment to any single interpretation and allow for a more flexible, exploratory approach to consciousness. Ultimately, this quantum psychological reinterpretation of the Bardos suggests that mystical experiences are not evidence of an external supernatural realm, nor are they meaningless hallucinations. They are profound encounters with the mind's capacity to perceive and interact with reality in new ways. Whether through meditation, psychedelics, or spontaneous awakening, these states reveal something fundamental: that reality is not a fixed structure but a participatory process. As with quantum systems, consciousness remains fluid, relational, and deeply interconnected. By approaching these states with curiosity rather than certainty, we do not reduce their mystery. We engage with it more fully, recognizing that the nature of reality itself is an unfolding question, one that is shaped by our awareness, our interpretations, and our willingness to let go into the unknown.